On this episode, Engine Tech is in the garage with a killer kit. The guys are loaded with tips and tricks, and we're stoked about this striking stroker.
Hey, welcome to Motorhead Garage. Well, boy, we got a treat for you today. You know, Sam and I are going to be doing something real special. We're going to be putting together the lower end of an engine. Actually, we're putting together a stroker motor. One of the first things you want to do is get the block nice and clean. You want to have something clean to start out with. Otherwise, it goes downhill from then on. Now, what we've done is we've gone ahead and had this honed out. This block has been all nice and clean. We've had the cam bearings installed, but the final thing I like to do is, as you can see right here, take some soap and water, wash out these cylinders, make sure they're good and clean. Now I'm using just an old rag here. I'll clean these out with a lint-free rag, which is important. And once I do that, then I'll spray it down with kind of like WD-40, for instance. Spray this all down real good, let it dry, because if you don't and you just dry it off, it's going to flash rust. So this will keep that from happening. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead with this. Sam's got some other things over here. It's important to have all the right parts, and he's got them.
You know, all the right parts. When you buy a stroker kit, you get a crank and rods. If you're building a motor, even if it's a stock motor, you got to search all around. Here's a great way to go. Engine Tech has a master kit, and we've got Joe Munoz here. Joe, tell us about your kit. Everything's in one box.
Yes, Sam. Everything's in the kit that you may need to rebuild the engine for the typical small block Chevrolet, small block Fords. We do the big block Fords, big block Chevrolets as well. It's a complete kit that allows the weekend warrior type racer to build a small block Chevrolet, for example, up into the 325, 350 horse range without spending a lot of money. The main advantages of our kit is that all the components in it are all matched to each other. They're all insured to work with each other. You get a choice of 6 camshafts, for example, on the small block kit that all are guaranteed to work with the compression ratio that the pistons put out. The rings are matched to the pistons. It's just a complete kit and an easy way of getting through the whole rebuilding process.
When you get a kit from Engine Tech, you get a high volume oil pump, you get a 3-piece double row timing chain set, coated hyper-eutectic pistons, and of course you get a choice of 6 cams, you get rings, you get everything you need, cam bearings, the whole thing. Matter of fact, you also offer performance crankshafts and rods as an option.
Yes, sir. They're not part of the kit, but what we do is we have SCAD and some other suppliers for the tailoring it to the customer's taste of different cranks and rods they can add on to the kit if they're wanting to change out the lower. And a lot of our customers are going to reuse their old factory crank and rods. This is another addition we have to the kit if they want such.
Now you supply these cam bearings in the kit. What's special about these?
These cam bearings are, we've considered the finest full circle cam bearing in the industry. They are have all the leading edge chamfers, consistent throughout the kit so for aiding in the ease of installation. It's made of a superior battery material to avoid pound out, and embeddability properties are better than most, as well as having polymer coated for ease on startup and wear characteristics.
That's great. Well, we got a long way to go. We got a lot of great stuff here. We're going to end up with a 40 over 383 stroker motor. Let's see what Davey's up to.
Okay, now we got the block all cleaned up, and what I've done, I've taken this cam lube and I've got all the cam bearings lubed. Next step now is for Sam. You got that cam ready, buddy?
All set to go. Now, what I've got on the end of this cam, this is a little tool. It's inexpensive. You can buy them at most performance shops. 3 bolts. That gives you leverage. Keep the cam from nicking the cam bearings. That'll save you a cam bearing. Also, if you look at all the lobes, I've applied this paste. This is Cam Shield. This is enriched with zinc paste that stays on. It's what you need to do on the lobes on a flat tappet cam so you can break it in properly. Journals are clean. Dave's got the lube there. And you just take your time and insert it. Make sure that you don't nick the cam bearings. This handle really gives you a lot of leverage. How am I doing there, buddy?
Yeah, you're doing good, and you got to take your time doing that. So, okay, while Sam is going ahead and sliding that in, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we got a lot more coming, so stay with us. All right, you're doing good, man. That handle makes a difference, doesn't it?
It makes a big difference.
This edition of Motorhead Garage, presented by ARP, is being brought to you by ARP, the world leader in fastener technology. Original Parts Group, the world's largest source for GMA body parts and accessories. AMS, because we care. and by FLOWMASTER, the exhaust technology company.
Welcome back to Motorhead Garage. We're still here in the garage having fun putting our 383 stroker motor together. Now the first thing I've done is I put all the main bearing inserts in and I put it in the rear seal. Hey Joe, take a look. Am I getting this in right?
Oh yeah, it's in the right position.
All right, now what you've got is a rear main bearing crankshaft oil seal. Part of it goes in the block and it's two-piece seal. But you know, you have a problem, and that is the crankshaft, they'll run a while, they get a groove on it. You can't sleeve a two-piece rear main crank because it's got a flange on it. So you'd have to have it spray welded and ground, very expensive. You come up with a great seal. Tell us about this.
Yeah, that's our two-piece double lip Viton seal designed for small block Chevrolets. And what it allows the seal to do is ride on a different part of the crank surface. It's inward about 70 thousandths from where the original position is. So if there's a groove in the seal, this will ride on a fresh part of the crank surface and it won't be down in the groove and weeping oil past it, as most standard position seals wind up doing.
That's really a simple but great fix. So, and in the seal, by the way, is going to have some crush like a bearing, so you don't need to put anything on it when you assemble this to, to seal it. This will seal against itself. Now, the main bearings are in, by the way, these are really good looking bearings. Now, this is something that you have made to your spec?
Yes, this is the Engine Tech main bearing set. It's a high silicone content aluminum alloy. You know, most of the aftermarket now has gone away from the traditional tri-metal bearing because the quality of the oils has improved so much that the need for the embeddability characteristic of the tri-metal bearing has gone away. The aluminum, because of the high silicone content, allows a lot greater pound out load carrying capacity, and it's less, it's more corrosion resistant than the tri-metal bearing. So it's, even though the tri-metal is still good for a lot of the heavy duty applications, we now recommend it for all automotive and light duty truck applications.
Well, cool. Nothing like having really good bearings, but you have to check the bearing oil clearance. I'm going to put the main caps on with all the bearings in it, torque them down to spec, and then I'll measure them. Dave's measuring the crankshaft.
You know, one of the things that you want to do before you put an engine together and you get a new crankshaft like we have here, or even if you got an old one, you want to check the clearances. And the way you do that, the way I like to do it, is with a micrometer. Now, some guys will use a caliper. I prefer a micrometer like this. And you need to learn how to read it. Before you start, though, you want to make sure that your mic is accurate. And they all come with a little gauge like this in order to test it to make sure that you have your mic accurate. If it's not, then you can adjust it so that it is accurate. And this one is pretty much right on the money. So we know that our measure is going to be good. Now, what I do is I'll take it, and I'm going down here to the front. This is the main bearing. You got the main bearing races right here, 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 and here. And of course, here on the crank, this is where the rod bearings go. And you want to measure them all. So what I'll do is I'll measure it, bring this up a little bit, and then you just get it so it just touches. You just got a little bit of drag on it. And this will come with a little bit of practice. Once you get the reading, then I like to write it down and keep track of it. Once I have them all down, then I can go and compare that with what Sam is doing. But this is how you get your clearances on here, or make sure you have them. And I always like to keep that because it keeps a record of what you're doing. Anyway, this is almost all done. We'll let Sam finish up what he's doing. We're going to compare the two.
All right, buddy, I've got these all written down here, and that's looking pretty consistent.
Okay, let me take a look at it.
You
here.
do the math.
Yeah, you give me the hard job all the time.
How I measured the bearings. We got all the bearings installed, and the main caps torqued to spec. Of course, everything's nice and dry. This is a snap gauge. You put it in here, and you move it around. Then you lock it. It's spring-loaded. You lock it down, take it out, take your micrometers, get in here, measure it, and it'll give you the accurate reading of the dimension of the inside of this bearing. Compare that to what you had in the crank, where we stand for clearance.
All right, so what I've done here is I've compared yours to mine. What I got is a large, about 3 thousandths, down to about 2.2, 2 and 2/10 is what it is. So we're well in spec.
Absolutely. Need to do that's real important. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to show you a great way to check your clearance without the use of mics and the snap gauge. Also, show you how to set up crankshaft end thrust. Stick around, we got a lot to do.
Hey, on this week's Industry Update, we're featuring products from ARP. Now, folks, you've heard of them for making dress-up fasteners here for engines, but they got more than that. They got some specialty items, too.
That's right. Now, for example, one of the problems you have with the LS1, LS6, and the 6 liters, the harmonic balances want to come off. ARP's got a nice kit here with the heavy bolt, the 12-point fastener, the washer, comes with the ultra torque assembly lube. Pop it in there, the balance is going to stay in place.
Yeah, and they also have these bell housing bolts right here for General Motors for the V6, V8 engines. Even got Chrysler torque converter bolts here. And if you guys are doing some performance work, put a high volume oil pump in there. They even got the Chevy small block oil pump drive. This is a high performance unit, so you don't have to worry about that.
That's right, and of course all these bolts are super high tensile strength, they're not going to fail. This is your 7/16 20 for your standard Chevy V8 harmonic balancer. And again, a nice bolt, nice thick washer. Put your assembly lube on the face of the bottom of the bolt, top of the washer, where the washer touches the balancer is dry. You get real consistent torque.
You sure do, and if you want a lot more information about ARP, all you have to do is go to their website.
Motorhead Garage, presented by ARP, coming to you from Borla Commerce Park.
Welcome back to Motorhead Garage. We're continuing on with our 383 stroker. Now what I did was I put some plastic gauge on the journal. I'll show you that in a minute. Put the rod cap on, and then I torqued it properly. Now we have these nice ARP studs. You get flat washers and flange nuts with the studs. Put the washer on dry. You take your ARP Ultra Torque Assembly Lube. You put some on the face of the nut, on the top of the washer, and on the threads. So when you tighten it up, it becomes a bearing surface and you get accurate torque. When I pull the cap off, now I've torqued it down to 80 pounds of spec, and you can see here the plastic gauge has squeezed out. Now this is what plastic gauge looks like. It's a very fine little thread. It's inexpensive, you can buy it anywhere. Put it across the bearing, you torque it down, it squeezes it out. Then there's graduations right here. They're metric and inch depending on which side you look at. And you compare that to the envelope, right there. Got a shade over 2 thousandths oil clearance, right where we want to be. It's a great way, inexpensive way, but make sure you do something to check your oil clearance on all your bearings. If you don't have a mic and snap gauge, plastic gauge will get you by. I'm going to set up now with the dial indicator to check the crankshaft end float. While I'm setting up, let's take a look and see how Dave's doing with the pistons.
All right, what I've done here now is I've taken all the rods and the pistons out. I've taken the rods. You can see these are from Scat, and boy, they are nice rods. What you got to do is you want to make sure you break the rod bolts loose first. That way you can separate these things. So you have to do that, of course, put in the bearings. The other thing I've done is got the pistons out, and I've oriented. I've gone ahead and started to check this thing out to make sure that I get the rod and the piston assembled in the proper way. Now, there is a certain orientation to that, and a lot of times pistons are marked with a little notch on it to let you know that this goes to the front end of the block. What you want to do is you want to put a little bit of oil on your rod, your piston, and your pin. Pre-assemble everything. See how it's all going to fit. You want to measure, make sure everything's going to be fine. In this particular case, looks like we're in pretty good shape. Now, I put one retainer in here just to hold it. But I've gone through all of this just to check everything. I've left one piston here, of course, undone. And the reason for that is because we're going to use this as a way of checking our piston rings, squaring them up in our block. And before I go too much farther, we got to get all the piston rings checked, measured, so that I can assemble them on here.
All right, now we're going to check crankshaft end float, which is the amount the crankshaft moves back and forth. What you have is it's controlled by the flange bearing or the thrust bearing. In this particular engine, it's in the number 5 main, sometimes it's in the center main. It's a bearing that's flanged over, and of course you got to have some clearance or it'll burn up. So what I do is set up a magnetic indicator, a dial indicator on a magnetic base, move the crank in one direction, 0 the meter, and then I'll move the crank back, make sure we're zeroed. And if you look at that, we've got almost 3 thousandths crankshaft end float. That's good. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. If it's too tight, you'll burn the flange bearings out. That's all the, up to the crank grinder. It's got to be ground. If it's too loose, again, sometimes you can try a different bearing that has a little thicker flange on it. Most of the time, the crank is going back to the grinder to be fixed. So with that all set, the crank turns freely, and that's the important thing. Even though you've checked everything, make sure the crank will turn freely. Everything's torque tight and it turns like glass. That's the way it should be. Hey Dave, we're about ready to bring your pistons over here, buddy. See if we can set this up.
Okay, partner. Got everything just about done here for you.
That's great. Looks good.
Get this up here. Here's your ringer, and here's your pistone.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, now what I've done here, folks, is I've got everything together. What I did do is I left one piston off the rod. I want to show you this hoop, by the way. What we have here is what we call a floating pin or floating piston. What happens in most cases, or a lot of cases, the pin is pressed into the rod. It just stays put. In this case, it floats. Less friction, works great for performance work. Now, the one thing you want to do is get your piston rings out. And by the way, when you get your box like this, be careful when you open it up. You want to look because it'll say top groove, second groove. You don't want to get those mixed up. Take out your ring, and you want to go and start measuring the clearance between the ring and the groove. This is important because if they're too tight, you're going to be in trouble. You want about 1.5 thou clearance. So I got a feeler gauge here for that, and it's exactly what I got. You just got a nice little drag on that. You want to take all those rings, you got to do that with all your pistons, so it takes some time, but it's well worth it. Meanwhile, Sam is going and taking these rings and measure them for the bore.
You know, this is the most important thing, is measuring things in an engine. And like before you send it out for balance, like your crankshaft and rods and all that stuff, fit everything, fit it dry, make sure it's going to work. Because if you send it out and the balance guy grinds on it or welds on it, then you can't send it back if it doesn't fit. These rings are real high quality. They're chrome moly rings. The Engine Tech kit's got all high quality stuff in it. And these are hyper-eutectic pistons, coated skirts. Dave left me a piston loose because I'm using that to push the ring down square in the bore. Once it's square, I can look at the ring gap, which is right there. That's a critical measurement. You want to have about 16 thousandths, 14 to 16 thousandths on this engine. I got a 15 thousandths feeler gauge, middle of the spec, and that's perfect. It's right on the money. And that tells me the bore job is good and the ring set is terrific.
You did good, but what happens if it's too tight? We've got a fix for that, and that is this ring cutter right here. This is one of the types that they look like. Put it in there, you can grind the edges of the ring down and then get it to the right gap that you want. But if it's too big, we can't shrink it.
That's right, you just need to get a different set of rings. Now, we need to take a quick break. We've got a lot more coming on our 383 stroker brake. We come back, going to show you really trick timing components that come in the Engine Tech kit with a 3-keyway crankshaft sprocket.
Let's get these things all together and in there.
All right.
This may be a first on the Steel Spotlight, a car that's actually my fault in some way, shape, or form, correct?
Correct, that is correct. We actually met at the SEMA show last year. You invited us to get a car done for your show. This is the wife's car. We found this for her about 3 years ago. It's something she's wanted since we've met. She's always wanted a 4-door Bel Air. Funny thing is, we live in Wisconsin, managed to find one. All of it was there in Wisconsin.
And you kept it very original. I love that you kept the 6-cylinder in here too.
Oh yeah, that was a big fight between the rest of the family. I've got a lot of big motorheads in the family, and it was kind of a bet to see if we could make a 6 move.
You guys had to learn some skills just to get this thing done, didn't you?
Oh yes, the wife actually, the interior that's done on the car, this was her first run at doing actual car interior, and there was no seats in it. It was a metal frame, so there was no pattern. We just had to make up the foam, what goes where, that whole thing.
If I'm at fault for this, I'm not going to apologize for that, but you're in trouble for what I request next.
This edition of Motorhead Garage, presented by ARP, is being brought to you by MAHLE, driven by performance. Greenball Tires, tires for the road for work and play. Rock Smasher, never kneel to a tire again. And by Bruce High Performance Transport, leading the industry since 1981.
Hey, welcome back to Motorhead Garage. Well, you can see we got our short block pretty much together. The only thing left to do now is to time the cam. And Sam, you know, there's a little story here about that crank sprocket in there.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of guys call these crank gears, it's a sprocket because it drives a chain. Now this is a really nice high performance double roller chain with the 2 sprockets, are all steel, comes in the Engine Tech kit. Here's a unique thing. This is a crankshaft sprocket that has 3 keyways. when your number one piston's at top dead center on a Chevrolet, the keyway is about 2 o'clock. This dot's going to line up. Put these two lined up. Pretty much times your cam. For a street machine, a taxi cab, it's going to be fine. Doing a performance motor, you want to dial your cam in. You may need to retard or advance it a few degrees. So if you look at this, there's 3 keyways. This keyway, if you set it there, you're 4 degrees advance on the cam. Set it on that keyway, you're 4 degrees retard, and that does a really nice job.
Now, there's a reason why you may want to advance or retard your cam, depending on how you drive your car, what this thing is going in. If you want to get a lot of low-end torque, you'll want to advance your cam. If you went high-end torque, you want to retard the cam a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind, but whatever you do, be sure you follow what he's going to show you right now.
And you want to check it, and of course, it's dialing in your cam, follow your cam card, see where they want it set up. Now, there's a nice radius machined onto this sprocket, and it matches the radius on the snout of this nice scat crank. We don't want to damage anything. I see a lot of guys put these on, find the keyway, and even a brass punch. They take and they drive it on. You don't want to do that. You can set up stress risers. This is a harmonic balancer installing tool. You're going to need that to put your balancer on. And there's a sleeve. This goes on here. You put this in, and you get the arbor screwed into the end of the crankshaft, which is a 7/16 20. Then you take this as a bearing here, and you work it. You push it on until it bottoms out. It's nice, and you don't damage it.
Did I ever tell you how good a job you do on those things?
Yeah, I do a great job, I know. No, you don't tell me enough.
Oh, man. Anyway, there you go, folks. You can see what it takes to put this together. There's a lot more to it, of course, but we tried to give you some real highlights and some things to look at and things to do if you try to do this on your own. Once again, we've run out of time. We'll see you again next time here at Motorhead Garage.
So long. Why don't you go get us some coffee?
Coffee?
I'll finish this up. You can
It's
get us
stunning my
coffee.
growth. You kidding me?
Yeah, I can tell it has.